Michigan State did not quite reach its goal of the Big Ten championship game, but make no mistake about it, a lot of good things going on in East Lansing. We got Ryan O'Blenis on the line from The Only Colors. Check out his work on SB Nation. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. And as we started to run down everything going on with the Spartans before we started to record, a lot of good things here to talk about. So first and foremost, we'll put the best player on the team in the spotlight because he deserves it and he's earned it. So a Doak Walker Award and also Walter Camp Award for, and if you're not into awards, the Heisman Trophy, everybody knows about that. But if you're not into college football awards, these are about as prestigious as you can get for a running back or a football player overall. And they belong now to one Kenneth Walker III.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are well-deserved. And, I think certainly an argument can be made that Walker was snubbed from the Heisman list. But, the Walter Camp Player of the Year, that award is voted on by FBS head coaches and sports information directors, not 800 media members like the Heisman. So, I think that says a great deal about the kind of respect that Walker has, with coaches and SIDs and, people actually tied to these programs. So that's a big deal. And, obviously, I don't think there should have been any doubt that Walker was the best running back in the nation and should have won the Doak Walker Award. He's the first Spartan to win either award. So that's a really big deal. I think he's also the first ever Walter Camp Player of the Year winner to not be a Heisman finalist. So it's very interesting, how Heisman voters looked at him versus these other awards. But certainly well-deserved for, a kid who is just uber talented, but also incredibly humble. I think that when you look at Walker, you can make the argument that, maybe he lifted his team more so than any other one single player, in the entire country in terms of win totals. He's just an incredible talent and a great kid.
Yeah, it's certainly controversial and it's tricky and it's complex when you start to rate and rank players, especially in football. It's not like baseball where everybody comes to the batter's box, everybody bats, everybody throws, everybody fields. Basketball, everybody certainly has different positions, but they all score and rebound and assist. Football, different positions require completely different skill sets, so it's difficult to compare across the board. But and I don't want to state this as a fact, but I know that there's a strong connection historically between the Walter Camp Award and the Heisman Trophy, meaning if you win the Walter Camp Award, you have a high likelihood of winning the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, this year there was a pretty large disconnect between the Walter Camp intel versus the Heisman Trophy in regards to Kenneth Walker not even being invited to the ceremony. And again, there are too many spots, too many great players, not enough spots, I should say. So it's a difficult process and evaluating these players. I got to think that, for me, he was the Heisman leader for me personally after the Michigan game and going into the Ohio State game. Of course, the Ohio State game got away from them, and he had a bad ankle. The 6 carries for 25 yards probably was his undoing long-term for the season, I would think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But, I think it's hard to kind of fault them for that because, the defense allowed 3 touchdowns in the first 3 Ohio State possessions. They were down 21 points, just a few minutes into the game. You can't really run the ball in that situation. And as you mentioned, he also had a bad ankle in that game, so it wasn't worth the risk, to get him re-injured. And even if you watch he only had 6 carries, but even if you watch some of that, you could see that he did what he does, making people miss and, just trying to gain yards, gain positive momentum. And, it was just a game that got away from the Spartans very early on, and they weren't competitive at all. And, so why risk getting Walker hurt, so it is what it is.
Before we get to the Michigan State Peach Ball matchup against Pitt, let's run down a number of comings and goings from a personnel standpoint, because there's quite a bit to get to here in regard to the transfer portal. where you had stated to me that since the beginning of the season, 10 Spartans have hit the transfer portal, 6 or 7 of those guys just here in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, so, during the season, there was a freshman defensive end, Alex Okello. He didn't play at all. He entered the portal. Cornerback Kalen Gervin and linebacker Chase Klein, who were getting a decent amount of reps. I think Gervin, he started the season as a starter, but then that kind of fell off a bit. And so they both entered the portal midseason. And then since then, you've had Michael Dowell, who played a significant amount of reps, who, his brothers were Spartans too. I think he graduated, so maybe he's trying to move on now. But he started at nickelback for most of the season until Darius Snow took over that spot, and Dowell's playing time kind of went down. The biggest name is probably Ricky White, who absolutely torched Michigan in that 2020 game, but didn't do a whole lot else outside of that game. He was kind of away from the team this year, not participating in team activities for undisclosed reasons. Same with freshman safety Michael Gravely, and they both have entered the portal now. And there's a couple other guys, kicker Evan Johnson, cornerback Emmanuel Flowers, wide receiver, and CJ Hayes, who actually switched to defensive back this year but played receiver for most of his career. He also entered the portal. So, and then today it was just announced that offensive lineman James Ohanba is also in the portal. So, yeah, I believe
Ricky White. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I'm sorry, I was just saying I believe that's 10 total.
Yeah, Ricky White will certainly have his unique place in Michigan State history, torching the maize and blue. 8 catches for $196 and a touchdown from Rocky Lombardi in Game 2 in 2020 that sent Michigan reeling, and of course was Mel Tucker's first significant win there at Michigan State. Just an interesting footnote in history, since those were 8 of his 10 total catches in his career in East Lansing. Michael Dowell totaled 82 tackles with the Spartans. So those are the subtractions, but we've got some serious and significant, possibly significant additions to Michigan State's roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Running back Jalen Berger, who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, one of the more highly touted running backs in the 2020 class. He actually led Wisconsin, I believe, as a freshman in 2020 in rushing yards. Then he kind of fell out of thing over a little and was ultimately just dismissed from the Badgers team for some reasons. But, hopefully, I'm not necessarily worried about any kind of discipline issues with him because of how tight of a ship Mel Tucker runs. If you don't buy into the program, you're not going to play. So I think he'll be a valuable addition and will buy into the team. But then there are 2 really good linebackers who recently announced that they're transferring in. Jacoby Windman from UNLV. He totaled 169 tackles through 30 games with the Rebels, including 18.5 tackles for loss and 12 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. So he looks like a really good prospect. If you watch his highlights, he's all over the field making plays. And then there's also Aaron Brule from Mississippi State. So he'll be coming from one MSU to the other MSU. And he was also, a really, really good playmaker. My understanding is that he is very good at rushing the passer from his linebacker spot. But he also totaled 142 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, two fumble recoveries, 3 passes defended. So it's interesting because Michigan State runs a 4-2-5 defense, and you got Cale Halliday, who had kind of a breakout redshirt freshman season. He's been named freshman All-American by The Athletic and other places. And you got Quavaris Crouch, who is a supreme athlete, who was banged up toward the end of the year. So I don't know if Michigan State might be thinking about using more of a rotation at linebackers, bringing these 2 in. I don't know if they're thinking about potentially switching schemes or what, but definitely these 2 linebackers are going to be valuable additions. And I think they're also going to be big in rushing the passer. Michigan State's losing a lot of edge rushers with Drew Beasley, Jacob Panashuk, Drew Jordan. So Windman, he's small, but he actually started his career there at UNLV as a defensive end. So I think he can get after the quarterback too. So I think, these guys might not only be valuable as linebackers, but also as pass rushers. So we'll see how they're kind of plugged in and what happens with the defensive scheme and all the different puzzle pieces, but definitely excited about all three of those additions.
You mentioned Berger's initial campaign there at Wisconsin, arriving on campus as a 4-star. He averaged 5 yards a carry, 300 yards. He also obviously can come out of the backfield and catch the ball, 30 receptions in just less than 2 seasons. In terms of Brule, 11 games played for Mississippi State last year as a starter, 11 games played for a team that spent most of its season in the top 25. And you mentioned even from the linebacking position being a factor in the pass rush. And with Windman, you alluded to the total tackles for his career, 119 of those coming this season. So that's really substantial for him. So big producers at those 3 respective spots. So good additions again for Mel Tucker through the transfer portal. All right, we got Ryan O'Blennis on the line from the only colors on SB Nation. Michigan State, of course, with a standout season at 10-2, will take on Pitt in the Peach Bowl. And looking at that matchup, while Kenneth Walker will not be making an invitation or a trip to New York City, Kenny Pickett, the quarterback for Pitt, will. He had an outstanding season and has played himself into a lot of mock drafts pretty prominently. And Jordan Addison is the Biletnikoff Award winner. So Michigan State's porous secondary is going to be up for another challenge here.
Yeah, definitely. If Pickett plays, I think he went on the Dan Patrick show recently and said he's undecided. His offensive coordinator left to go to Nebraska, and I think Pickett had made comments in the past saying that if Mark Whipple left, he would probably leave Pittsburgh too. So on the Zoom call with media for the Peach Bowl with Mel Tucker and Pat Narduzzi said that he expected Pickett to play. So it's I guess it's kind of up in the air right now. That was before Whipple left, though. But definitely if Pickett plays, and Addison is a great receiver, as you mentioned, he just won the Biletnikoff Award, and Michigan State ranks dead last in passing defense in terms of total yardage given up by a wide margin, very wide. So certainly that's going to be a challenge, but hopefully Michigan State uses this time off to rest up. They've had a lot of key injuries back there with Charles Brantley. I still don't know if he'll be expected to play in that or not. Like your Hender playing banged up, and other guys too. Marquis Lowry could be back helping out. So, Pittsburgh has, I believe, the number 6 passing offense in the entire country. So definitely it's going to be a challenge, especially if Pickett plays. If he doesn't, then, obviously Michigan State's job is going to be a lot easier, but that's probably the number 1 matchup is, can Michigan State, stop Pittsburgh's passing game? And you saw it throughout the whole season as kind of, even though Michigan State doesn't necessarily like this term, kind of that bend, don't break defense, where a lot of the time, outside of games like Ohio State or Purdue, only 2 losses, where teams would often move the ball, between the 20-yard lines, but the red zone defense for Michigan State would tighten up, and, they would more often than not actually keep teams out of the end zone and either force field goals or, get turnovers. Or so it's, I think it'll be interesting to see if they stick with that kind of game plan, or if they're going to be more aggressive, or, whatever happens. But definitely then, the Kenny Pickett fake slide that he did in that ACC championship game, the NCAA came out and said, yeah, you can't do that anymore. So Russ will be blowing that dead. So I guess he won't, if he does play, he won't be doing that.
Yeah, with everything that we're asking of these defenders to have to adjust to these days, that would be a bit ridiculous if they would allow these players to get away with that.
Yeah, great.
No question about that. Jordan Addison posted the kind of numbers that you would expect from a Biletnikoff Award winner: 93 catches, almost 1,500 yards, and 17 touchdowns. And Ryan, I'm going to stick up just slightly for the Michigan State secondary and add a disclaimer that in reviewing their metrics, yes, last in giving up yardage, but if you go with per pass attempt, they're a pretty respectable, like top 35 in the nation. So teams were chucking the ball. Certainly, I know Jack Tuttle of Indiana threw it up 52 times and De'Ara King 59 times. So a lot of pass attempts against Michigan State, and certainly C.J. Stroud and Aiden O'Connell put it up 50 plus times against Michigan State. So yes, I'm not claiming it to be a good secondary, but at the same time, not quite as bad as the traditional stats might lead us to believe.
Exactly.
Talking to Michigan State, we got
heavy.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree. They played a lot of heavy passing attacks that would throw it 40, 50 times per game. So, the numbers are definitely inflated that way, but still a lot to improve there.
Got Ryan O'Blendis on the line from The Only Colors on Michigan State's platform on SB Nation. And, of course, it's the Peach Bowl, one of the New Year's Six. Great accomplishment for Michigan State at 10-2 and looking to finish in the top 10 in the country with a matchup against Pitt, the ACC champion. So the Big Ten finds itself in a situation where this is pretty standard, where they have to play up in seeding because so many teams move on to the playoff, move on to multiple New Year's Six games. So you've got the third seed basically in the Big Ten taking on the ACC number one seed and champion there. It's almost National Signing Day, and Michigan State, I got to say, even the heyday of Mark D'Antonio didn't produce these kind of recruiting results as it stands right now at 16th in the country, according to the 247 Sports rankings.
Yeah, it's definitely a very promising looking class coming in for Michigan State, with several 4 stars and, a lot of the top talent in the state of Michigan. So, the big one so far is Alex Van Sumeren, the defensive tackle, who's a 4-star, one of the top rated prospects in the country. And then, he's an in-state recruit as well. And his brother, Ben, is on the team as a linebacker. He transferred in from Michigan last year, and Alex was actually committed to Michigan before decommitting there and, eventually flipping to his commitment to Michigan State. So certainly he's going to be a huge one. At quarterback, you got Caden Hauser, who's now a 4-star as well, the number 13 quarterback prospect in the country out of St. John Bosco in California. Michigan State fans are very excited about him. He was an Elite 11 quarterback. He's definitely got a lot of talent. I think he kind of split there at St. John Bosco, but he's 4-star. He's very good, and he's a guy who can maybe come in a couple of years and make some things happen. We'll have to see how that one plays out. Then also in the state of Michigan, you got, with Van Sumeren, 3 other 4-stars and 4 of the top 10 players in the state, which is huge for Mel Tucker and his staff to win the state of Michigan over, the Michigan Wolverines, because, Michigan maybe doesn't always have the top tier talent in the country, but there are a lot of good players coming out of the state, and it's, pretty much essential for Michigan State to lay those roots. They hired Thomas Wilcher, who was the Detroit Cavs Tech high school coach for a long time, to kind of strengthen recruiting ties in Detroit and the surrounding areas. And, I think that's paying off dividends already. You got Dylan Tatum from West Bloomfield, who's a 4-star athlete. He's expected to play defensive back, probably safety. Jaden Mangum from Groves High School in Birmingham. He's also a 4-star athlete who's expected to play defensive back. And then you also have Antonio Gates Jr. from Dearborn Fordson, who is, of course, the son of NFL legend tight end Antonio Gates. So, these are some really big names, really big pedigrees, lineage, top players in the state. And then, there's quite a few good 3-stars too. Jack Nickel is one of the higher rated tight ends in the country. I think he's the number 26 tight end coming from Georgia. Malik Spencer is also out of Georgia. He's a good 3-star safety. You got some offensive linemen coming in, and Gavin Brocious, and Ashton Lepo and Braden Miller, Christian Phillips, who was, I believe, the first player to commit to Michigan State in the 2022 class. He's also out of Georgia. They call him Big Dooley. And yeah, I mean, just overall, it's a really good class. Tyrell Henry's another name that I'm another guy that I'm interested to watch how he develops. He's a wide receiver from Michigan too, out of Roseville. He's listed as an athlete in the recruiting rankings, but is expected to play wide receiver. And yeah, as you mentioned, this class right now is top 16 in the nation according to 24/7 Sports. I think it's number 13 according to Rivals. It's number 4 in the Big Ten. So it's definitely a huge step coming, from last year's class that Tucker brought in. He got a really late start to the job, and he still did a pretty good job. Bringing in a class that ranked number 46 in the country. But this is a huge jump going up to number 16. So, Tucker's made some changes on his staff to recruiting. He brought over, Wisconsin's recruiting guy, and he's done a great job. So, definitely this is looking like a promising class. You never know how it's really going to shake out with these rankings and these players. You have to kind of just wait and see. But, at least on paper, this looks like a really strong class. And, Mel Tucker was always touted as being a really good recruiter, a great recruiter. And I think we're seeing that in this cycle.
Yeah, to your initial point, Michigan's certainly not an elite state in producing high school football talent, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's probably in the top, from what I've seen, top 10 to 12 to 15 states in the country in producing football talent. And I see where Mel Tucker, in running down the various players that you profiled there, brings in 4 of the top 9 in the state. So that's definitely a good sign, because you just don't have Michigan there as well. But you got schools like Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Kentucky's coming up to Ohio and Michigan grabbing players. And they've been pretty successful at that in recent years. So Mel Tucker doing a nice job of keeping those schools away at this point.
And
all right.
Sorry, I just wanted to touch too. It seems like Tucker might also be flipping another big 4-star wide receiver in Armani Winfield, who was committed to Texas for a long time out of Texas. So he's one that Michigan State is trying to flip, and all the momentum seems to be going toward him. He's a high 4-star. I think he'd be the highest player in their class, actually. And he's going to announce where he's going to sign on early signing day, I believe, next week. And then Keontae Goodwin, you mentioned Kentucky. He's been committed there for but that's another one that Michigan State's been trying to work on for a flip. I don't know if that one's going to happen as much as I believe the Winfield one will, but we'll see. And then another player who recently decommitted from West Virginia, Zion Young, defensive end. He seems to be trending toward Michigan State as well.
Winfield's the top 200 player in the country, regardless of position, out of Texas. And if you're the 31st rated player in the state of Texas, you're highly sought after. Ohio State, Oklahoma, and as you mentioned, Texas. And the crystal ball predictions are looking good for Mel Tucker. 85% pointed toward Michigan State. So that would be a huge get. No question, a playmaker out of Texas. All right, good stuff, Ryan. We appreciate you stopping by, and maybe we'll catch up with you again after National Signing Day and leading right into the Peach Bowl.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.